The Long Island serial killer, also referred to as L.I.S.K, the Gilgo Beach killer, and the Craigslist Ripper, is an unidentified suspected serial killer who is believed to have murdered between 10 and 16 people over a period of nearly 20 years, and to have disposed of their bodies in areas on the South Shore of Long Island, New York. Most of the known victims were sex workers who advertised on Craigslist. The victims' remains were found over a period of months in 2010 and 2011, after the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert resulted in a police search of the area along the Ocean Parkway, near the remote beach towns of Gilgo and Oak Beach in Suffolk County. The remains of 4 victims designated the Gilgo Four were found within a quarter of a mile of each other near Gilgo Beach in December 2010. 6 more sets of remains were found in March and April 2011, in Suffolk County and Nassau County. Police believe the latter sets of remains predate the 4 bodies found in December 2010. Gilbert's remains were found a year after the remains of the Gilgo Four were discovered. Her cause of death remains. Exit for Robert Moses Causeway on the Ocean Parkway, near where the first body was found. Map indicating locations of where the bodies were discovered. Police investigations. The first discovery of human remains was made by the side of Ocean Parkway in Oak Beach on the 11th of December, 2010. The investigation was prompted by the search for Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old sex worker who had disappeared in the area in May that year after fleeing from a client's home and making a 23-minute-long emergency call to 911, saying, "They are trying to kill me." A month after her disappearance, the Suffolk County Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau asked Officer John Mallier to search for Gilbert with his trained cadaver dog, a German Shepherd named Blue. Over the course of summer 2010, Mallier unsuccessfully searched the gated beach community where Gilbert had last been seen. The officer made a new attempt at a search on the 11th of December, 2010, staying close to the shoulder of the parkway. Mallier based his choice of search area on FBI data indicating that dumped bodies are frequently found close to roadways. Despite thick vegetation and a light layer of snow, Mallier's cadaver dog alerted to a scent which the pair tracked to a skeleton in a disintegrating burlap bag. The remains were later identified as Melissa Barthelemy's. Police discovered 3 additional bodies while searching the scene for further evidence. The bodies of the 4 victims, Maureen Brainerd, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman and Amber Costello, were found approximately 500 feet, 150 m, from each other. In March 2011, the partial remains of Jessica Taylor were found along Ocean Parkway. 8 years earlier, in 2003, Taylor's partial remains had been found in Manorville, a town in Suffolk County. The next month, in April 2011, police discovered 3 additional sets of remains: an unidentified female toddler, an unidentified Asian person, and Valerie Mack, whose partial remains, like those of Jessica Taylor, had been found in Manorville years earlier in November 2000. 2 more bodies were found in Nassau County: an unidentified woman whose partial remains had previously been found on Fire Island in 1996, and an unidentified woman with a distinctive tattoo of peaches who was later found to be the mother of the unidentified toddler found in Suffolk County. On the 9th of May, 2011, police speculated that because of similarities in the cases, Valerie Mack, who at the time was unidentified, and Jessica Taylor may have been murdered by a second, separate killer on November 29, 2011. However, police announced that they believed one person to be responsible for all 10 murders, and that the perpetrator is almost certainly from Long Island. The single killer theory stems from common characteristics between the condition of the remains and forensic evidence related to the bodies. In June 2011, Suffolk County Police announced a $25,000 award for information leading to an arrest in the Long Island murders. Shannon Gilbert's remains were finally located in Oak Beach in December 2011, 19 months after her disappearance. The cause of her death is contested. All of the murders remain unsolved. FBI involvement. On the 10th of December, 2015, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Tim Sinney announced that the FBI had officially joined the investigation. The announcement came one day after former police chief James Burke was indicted for civil rights violations and conspiracy. Burke, who resigned from the department in October 2015, was reported to have blocked FBI involvement in the L.I.S.K cases for years. The FBI had previously assisted in the search for victims but had never officially been a part of the investigation. In November 2016, Burke was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and conspiracy. Bittrolf named as suspect. On the 12th of September, 2017, Suffolk County Prosecutor Robert Biancavilla from the County District Attorney's Office announced that John Bitrolf, a carpenter from Manorville, Long Island, was a suspect in at least one of the L.I.S.K murders. Bittrolf had been convicted in May of that year of the murders of 2 sex workers in 1993 and 1994. 2020 release of evidence to the public. On the 16th of January, 2020, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Geraldine Hart released images of a belt found at the crime scene with the letters HM or WH, depending on the orientation of the belt, embossed in black leather. The belt had been found during the initial investigation near Ocean Parkway in Gilgo Beach. Police believe that the belt was handled by the perpetrator and that it had not belonged to any of the victims. The police revealed few details about the belt's evidentiary value and would not comment on exactly where it had been found. It was also announced that new scientific evidence was being used in the investigation and that they had launched gilganews.com, a website enabling the department to share news and receive tips regarding the investigation. Identification of Valerie Mack through genetic genealogy. In June 2019, a proposal was made to use genetic genealogy to identify the unidentified victims and possibly the killer in the L.I.S.K case. On the 28th of May, 2020, Jane Doe number 6 inches was identified as Valerie Mack, who also went by the name of Melissa Taylor. Victims discovered in December 2010. The Gilgo 4. Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Brainerd Barnes of Norwich, Connecticut, was 25 when she disappeared. She was last seen on the 9th of July, 2007, saying that she planned to spend the day in New York City. She was never seen again. Brainerd Barnes, a mother of 2, worked as a paid escort via Craigslist to pay the mortgage on her house. She had been out of the sex industry for 7 months, but she returned to the work in order to pay her bills after receiving an eviction notice. Her body was found in December 2010. Shortly after her disappearance, a friend of Brainerd Barnes's, Sarah Carnes, received a phone call from a man on an unfamiliar number. The man claimed that he had just seen Brainerd Barnes and that she was alive and staying at a whorehouse in Queens. He refused to identify himself and could not tell Carnes the location of the house. He told Carnes he would call back and give her the address, but never called again. Carnes said that the man had no discernible New York or Boston accent. At the time of her disappearance, she was working at a Super 8 motel in Manhattan. On the night of the 9th of July, 2007, she called a friend in Connecticut and told her that she was planning on meeting a client outside of the motel. Like many of the victims, Brainerd Barnes was very petite, at 4 feet 11 inches, 1.50 m, tall and 105 pounds, 48 kg. She had been strangled. Melissa Barthelemy. Barthelemy, 24, of Erie County, New York, went missing on the 12th of July, 2009. She had been living in the Bronx in New York and working as an escort through Craigslist. On the night she went missing, she met with a client, deposited $900 in her bank account, and attempted to call an old boyfriend, but did not get through. Beginning 1 week later, and lasting for 5 weeks, her teenage sister, Amanda, received a series of vulgar, mocking and insulting calls from a man, who may have been the killer, using Melissa Barthelemy's cell phone. The caller asked if Amanda was a whore like her sister. The calls became increasingly disturbing, and eventually culminated in the caller telling Amanda that her sister was dead, and that he was going to watch her rot. Police traced some of the calls to Madison Square Garden, Midtown Manhattan, and Massapequa, but were unable to determine who was making the calls. Barthelemy's mother noted that there were a lot of calls to Manorville from her daughter's phone around the time of her disappearance in September 2017. John Bitrolf, a carpenter from that town convicted of 2 other murders, was named as a suspect in the L.I.S.K cases. Barthelemy was 4 feet 10 inches, 1.47 m, tall and 95 pounds, 43 kg. She had been strangled. Megan Waterman. Waterman, 22, of South Portland, Maine, went missing on the 6th of June, 2010, after placing advertisements on Craigslist as an escort. The previous day she had told her 20-year-old boyfriend that she was going out and would call him later. At the time of her disappearance, she was staying at a motel in Hawkporch, New York, 15 miles northeast of Gilgo Beach. Her body was recovered in December 2010. Waterman was a mother of one and had become a victim of sex trafficking. Waterman was 5 feet 5 inches, 1.65 m, tall. 30. She had been strangled. Amberlyn Costello. Costello, 27, of West Babylon, New York, a town 10 miles north of Gilgo Beach, was a prostitute and heroin user who went missing on the 2nd of September, 2010. That night she reportedly went to meet a stranger who had called her several times and offered $1,500 for her services. Born in Charlotte and raised in Wilmington, North Carolina, Costello was living in West Babylon, New York when she disappeared. Her family believed that she was in a residential drug rehabilitation center and so she was not immediately reported missing when she stopped responding to messages and phone calls. Prior to moving to West Babylon, Costello had been living with her second husband in Clearwater, Florida, and was working as a waitress. A strong student, Costello's drug addiction began when she was a teenager. She had been sexually assaulted by a neighbor when she was 6 years old. Costello was 4 feet 11 inches, 1.50 m, and weighed approximately 100 pounds, 50 kg. She had been strangled. Victims discovered in March and April, 2011. 4 more sets of remains were discovered on the 29th of March and the 4th of April, 2011. All of the remains were found in another area off the parkway, near Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, within 2 miles and to the east of those found in December, 2010. The newly discovered victims were Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, an unidentified woman designated Jane Doe number 3 inches or Peaches, and an unidentified toddler who was the daughter of Peaches. 8 Suffolk police subsequently expanded the search area up to the Nassau County border, looking for more victims. 2 further sets of remains were discovered on the 11th of April, 2011, after the search expanded into Nassau County. They were found about 1 mile apart, approximately 5 miles west of those found in December. 1 set of remains belonged to a victim now thought to be a trans woman. Designated Asian male, police said that the victim had been dead for between 5 and 10 years. The other remains were those of Jane Doe number 7 inches whose partial remains had been discovered on Fire Island in 1996. Identified. Jessica Taylor. Taylor was 20 years old and living in Manhattan when she went missing on the 21st of July, 2003. On the 26th of July, 2003, her naked and dismembered torso, missing its head and hands, was discovered 45 miles, 72 km, east of Gilgo Beach in Manorville, New York. These remains were identified by DNA analysis later that year. Taylor's torso was found atop a pile of scrap wood at the end of a paved access road off Halsey Manor Road, just north of where it crosses the Long Island Expressway. Plastic sheeting was found underneath the torso, and a tattoo on her body had been mutilated with a sharp instrument. Further remains found on the 29th of March, 2011, at Gilgo, including the remains of a skull, a pair of hands, and a forearm were matched to Taylor. She had worked in Washington, D.C., and Manhattan as a sex worker. Taylor was last seen working around the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan between the 18th and 22nd of July, 2003. Valerie Mack Melissa Taylor Manorville Jane Doe No. 6 inches. Mack, 24, also known as Melissa Taylor, was living in Philadelphia and working as an escort when she went missing in 2000. 44. Like many of the victims, she was small in stature at approximately 5 feet, 1.5 m, and weighing approximately 100 pounds, 50 kg. Mack's partial remains were discovered in Manorville on November 19, 2000, but were not identified until 2020. Her torso was found wrapped in garbage bags and dumped in the woods near the intersection of Halsey Manor Road and Mill Road, adjacent to a set of power lines and a nearby power line access road. A head, right foot, and hands, found on the 4th of April, 2011, were at first determined to have belonged to an unidentified victim, dubbed Jane Doe number 6 inches. It was later determined that they belonged to the same woman whose torso had been found in 2000. Her right foot had been cut off high above the ankle, possibly to conceal an identifying mark or tattoo. Citation needed. On the 28th of May, 2020, police announced that the remains had been identified as Valerie Mack, who had last been seen by family members in the spring or summer of 2000 in the area of Port Republic, New Jersey. The dismembered remains of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor were both disposed of in a similar manner, and in the same part of Manorville, suggesting a link. Citation needed. Unidentified. On the 20th of September, 2011, police released composite sketches of 2 of the unidentified victims, dubbed Asian male and Jane Doe number 6 inches, whose remains had been found in March and April, 2011, as well as photos of jewelry found on the remains of a female toddler and her mother, Jane Doe number 3, found on the 4th and 11th of April, respectively. 49. One of the sets of remains found in Nassau County on the 11th of April was later identified as the mother of the toddler. 49. Peaches Jane Doe No. 3 inches. Main article, Peaches, murder victim. On the 11th of April, 2011, police in Nassau County discovered dismembered skeletal human remains inside a plastic bag near Jones Beach State Park. The victim was dubbed Jane Doe No. 3. DNA analysis later positively indicated that the remains belonged to a woman whose torso had been found in Hempstead Lake State Park 14 years earlier. On the 28th of June, 1997, the dismembered torso of an unidentified young African American woman was found at Hempstead Lake State Park, in the town of Lakeview, New York. The torso was found in a green plastic Rubbermaid container, which was dumped next to a road along the west side of the lake. Investigators reported that the victim had a tattoo on her left breast of a heart-shaped peach with a bite out of it and 2 drips falling from its core. In December 2016, Peaches and Jane Doe number 3 inches were positively identified as being the same person. 50 DNA analysis also identified Peaches as the mother of baby Doe. 51. She was found wearing gold jewelry similar to that of her daughter, baby Doe. A third set of remains, the skeleton of a female toddler between 16 and 24 months of age, or, by another account, 1 to 4 years of age, 52, was found on the 4th of April, 2011, about 250 feet, 80 m, away from the partial remains of Valerie Mack. The body was wrapped in a blanket and showed no visible signs of trauma. DNA tests determined that the child's mother was Jane Doe number 3, whose body was found 10 miles, 16 km, east, near Jones Beach State Park. The toddler was reported to be African American and was wearing gold earrings and a gold necklace. John Doe Asian male. The body of a young Asian person who had died from blunt force trauma was also discovered on the 4th of April, 2011, at Gilgo Beach, very close to where the first 4 sets of remains had been discovered in December 2010. The victim was determined to be biologically male but was found wearing women's clothing, suggesting that they may have identified as female. The unidentified victim was between 17 and 23 years of age, 5 feet 6 inches, 1.68 m, in height, missing 4 teeth, and may have had a musculoskeletal disorder which would have affected their gait. They had been dead for between 5 and 10 years. 49. In September 2011, police released a composite sketch of the victim. Jane Doe No. 7 inches Fire Island Jane Doe. A human skull and several teeth were recovered on the 11th of April, 2011, at Tobay Beach. These remains were linked through DNA testing to a set of severed legs found in a garbage bag on Fire Island 15 years earlier, on the 20th of April, 1996. 51, 49, 54. Jane Doe number 7's remains were the second set to be discovered in Nassau County on the 11th of April, 2011. Jane Doe number 7 had a surgical scar on her left leg. Discovery of Shannon Gilbert's body. On the 13th of December, 2011, Police announced that the remains of Shannon Gilbert had been found in a marsh about half a mile from where she had disappeared. A week earlier, some of her clothing and belongings had been discovered in the same vicinity. Gilbert was last seen banging on a resident's door and screaming for help before running off into the night. Gilbert made an emergency 911 call that night, saying that she feared for her life. Police have stated that the death of Gilbert, an escort whose disappearance triggered the search during which the first set of bodies was found, is not related to the Long Island serial killer case. Gilbert's now deceased mother Mary Gilbert, however, strongly advocated for the theory that Shannon Gilbert had been murdered by a serial killer. Timeline: 1996. The 20th of April, 1996. Fire Island, Jane Doe number 7's partial remains found on Fire Island. 1997. The 28th of June, 1997. Peaches, Jane Doe number 3's partial remains found at Hempstead Lake State Park. 2000. Spring-summer 2000. Valerie Mack last seen by family members. November 19, 2000. Valerie Mack's partial remains found in Manorville. 2003. July 2003, Jessica Taylor last seen. The 26th of July, 2003, Jessica Taylor's partial remains are found in Manorville. 2007. The 9th of July, 2007, Maureen Brainerd Barnes last seen. July 2007, a friend of Brainerd Barnes's, Sarah Carnes, receives a phone call from a man claiming that he had just seen Brainerd Barnes and that she was alive and staying at a whorehouse in Queens. 2009. The 10th of July, 2009, Melissa Barthelemy last seen. July, August 2009, Amanda Barthelemy, sister of Melissa Barthelemy, receives a series of vulgar, mocking and insulting calls from a man using Melissa Barthelemy's cell phone. The caller eventually tells Amanda that her sister is dead. 2010. The 2nd of May, 2010, Shannon Gilbert makes a panicked phone call to 911 at 4:51 a.m. after fleeing a client's house in Oak Beach. She bangs on the doors of several neighboring houses and disappears. The 6th of June, 2010, Megan Waterman last seen. The 2nd of September, 2010, Amberlyn Costello last seen. The 11th of December, 2010, Melissa Barthelemy's remains are found. The 13th of December, 2010, Megan Waterman, Amberlyn Costello, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes's remains are found. 2011. The 29th of March, 2011, Jessica Taylor's further partial remains found at Gilgo. The 4th of April, 2011, Valerie Mack's further partial remains found. The 4th of April, 2011, Baby Doe, the 16-24-month-old daughter of Peaches, found. The 4th of April, 2011, John Doe Asian male found. The 11th of April, 2011, Peaches Jane Doe number 3's further partial remains found near Jones Beach State Park. The 11th of April, 2011, Fire Island Jane Doe number 7's further partial remains found at Tobay Beach. The 13th of December, 2011, Shannon Gilbert's remains are found in a marsh at Oak Beach. 2016, edit. December, 2016, Peaches and Jane Doe number 3 inches are positively identified as being the same person. 2017. September, 2017, John Bittrolf, a carpenter from Manorville convicted of the murders of 2 other prostitutes, is named as a suspect in the L.I.S.K cases. Bittrolf had been convicted of murdering Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee, whose bodies were found in 1993 and 1994 respectively. 2020. The 28th of May, 2020, confirmation announced of forensic identification of formerly unidentified remains of Valerie Mack. Other possible victims identified. Tina Elizabeth Foggia. 19-year-old Tina Foggia was last seen alive in the early morning hours of the 1st of February, 1982, at the Hammerheads rock music venue on Sunrise Highway, West Islip. She had hitchhiked from her home to the venue to see a friend performing with a Queens-based band, Equinox. Her remains were discovered by Department of Transportation workers on the 3rd of February on a shoulder of the Sagticus State Parkway in Suffolk County. Her dismembered body, which had been placed in 3 separate plastic garbage bags, was found a few miles north of the Robert Moses Causeway, which leads to Jilgo Beach and Oak Beach. A diamond ring that Foggia was known to wear was missing, and the DNA of an unknown male was found on the garbage bags. Police have not ruled out the possibility that Tina Foggia was an early victim of the Long Island serial killer, but have stated that a connection is not an active avenue of the investigation. Shannon Maria Gilbert, edit. Shannon Maria Gilbert, the 24th of October, 1986 to the 1st of May, 2010, was an escort who may have been a victim of the Long Island serial killer. She left for a client's residence in Oak Beach after midnight on the 1st of May, 2010. At 4:51 in the morning, 911 dispatchers received a panicked phone call from Gilbert, who can be heard saying that there was someone after her and that they were trying to kill her. She was last seen a short time later banging on the front door of a nearby Oak Beach residence and screaming for help before running off into the night. After 19 months of searching, police found Gilbert's remains in a marsh, half a mile from where she was last seen. In May 2012, the Suffolk County medical examiners ruled that Gilbert accidentally drowned after entering the marsh. They believe that she was in a drug-induced panic, and have concluded that hers was death by misadventure or inconclusive. Her family believes she was murdered. 64. On November 15, 2012, a lawsuit was filed by her mother, Mary Gilbert, against the Suffolk County Police Department in the hopes of getting more answers about what happened to her daughter the night she went missing. Due to the controversy about Gilbert's death, in September 2014, famed forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden agreed to conduct an independent autopsy of Gilbert's remains in hopes of determining a clear cause of death. 66. Upon examination of Gilbert's remains, Baden found damage to her hyoid bone, suggesting that strangulation may have occurred. Baden also noted that her body was found face up, which is not common for drowning victims. Despite this, her death is still officially listed by police as an accident. On the 23rd of July, 2016, Mary Gilbert was murdered in her home in Ellenville, New York. Later that day, her younger daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Gilbert, was arrested and charged with the stabbing death of her mother. On the 6th of May, 2020, the New York State Supreme Court ordered Suffolk County Police to release Gilbert's 911 call recording, denying their request to withhold it after more than 10 years. The tapes were released to Gilbert's estate attorney, John Ray, a short time later. Under the court order, Ray is barred from discussing the specifics of the call. He did, however, comment that the nature of the calls contradict what Suffolk Police Detective Vincent Stefan had described in earlier reports about the calls from that morning. Specifically, Gilbert's tone had been described by Detective Stefan as calm, and indicated no desperation. After reviewing the tapes, Ray claimed that this was not true. On the 13th of May, 2022, the Suffolk County Police Department released the 911 call. Andre Isaac. Andre Isaac was a professional drag queen known by his stage name, Sugar Bear. He was 6 feet 5 inches tall and was 25 years old when he disappeared from East New York in November 2002. Isaac's torso was found close to the boardwalk on Beach 63 Street in Auburn, Queens on the 17th of December, 2002. On the 25th of January, 2003, his head was discovered by ice skaters in East Milpond in Moriches, New York in Suffolk County, with a single bullet wound to a temple. His arms and legs were later found several miles away in plastic bags. Isaac's case was added to the Suffolk County Police Department Jilgo News website on the 29th of May, 2020. Jacqueline Ashley Smith. Jacqueline Smith, 16, was last seen in Brooklyn, New York on the 7th of August, 1999. She had left her home at 9 p.m. to visit friends and never came back. She was reported missing on the 12th of August, 1999. On the 20th of June, 2000, an unidentified female torso was recovered near Beach 88th Street in Rockaway Beach, Queens, NY. The torso was found in plastic bags and wrapped with tape. No other body parts were recovered. The case was previously listed in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System as Case UP 6058. The victim was later identified as Jacqueline Smith. 2 years later, the torso of Andre Isaac was also recovered in Rockaway not far from where Jacqueline was found. Tanya Rush. On the 23rd of June, 2008, Tanya Rush, 39, was last seen around 3 a.m. walking towards a subway station in Brooklyn. Her dismembered body was found by a state road cleaning crew inside a black canvas suitcase on the 27th of June, 2008, in plain sight on the Newbridge Road ramp leading to the westbound Southern State Parkway in Belmore, New York. Rush was a mother of 3 who had been a Salvation Army volunteer and had worked in telemarketing. She took up sex work to support a drug addiction. Rush was African American and lived in the Van Dyke Houses, a Brownsville public housing complex in Brooklyn, New York. Unidentified. Unidentified woman, Lattingtown. On the 23rd of January, 2013, a woman walking her dog found human remains in a small patch of brush in a sandy area along the shore at the end of Sheep Lane in Lattingtown, near Oyster Bay. The skeletal remains showed signs of trauma and were wrapped in a particular type of material that police have not disclosed. The remains are believed to be those of a woman between the ages of 20 and 30 who was possibly Asian. She was wearing a 22-carat solid gold pig pendant which may be related to the Chinese zodiac year of the pig. The relevant birth years are 1971, 1983 and 1995, possibly suggesting that the woman died at the age of 29. Investigators believe that her body had been dumped before Hurricane Sandy in late 2012. Her case may be connected to the other 10 bodies found 32 miles, 51 km, away in and around Gilgo Beach, though unlike the other victims, her body was buried rather than left above ground. Cherry's unidentified woman, Mamaroneck. On the 3rd of March, 2007, a suitcase containing the dismembered torso of an unidentified Hispanic or light-skinned African American woman washed up on a beach at Harbor Island Park, in the town of Mamaroneck. The victim had a tattoo of 2 cherries on her left breast, similar in appearance to the tattoo found on Peaches. She was determined to have been stabbed to death. Never identified, the victim is referred to as Cherries by investigators. One of her dismembered legs washed up at Cold Spring Harbor on the 21st of March, 2007, and the other at Oyster Bay in the village of Cove Neck the following day. Cherries was dismembered in a fashion similar to 3 other victims, Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, and Peaches, meaning she may be linked to the other official victims. Identity of the killer. The media has speculated about a profile of the killer, referred to by police as Joe C., unknown subject. According to the New York Times, the perpetrator is most likely a white male who would have been in his mid-20s to mid-40s and who is very familiar with the South Shore of Long Island. He had access to burlap sacks, which he used to hold the bodies for disposal. He may have a detailed knowledge of law enforcement techniques, and perhaps ties to law enforcement, which have thus far helped him avoid detection. Newsday reporters speculated that serial killer Joel Rifkin, a former resident on Long Island, may have been responsible for some of the older remains found in March and April, 2011. 4 of the victims' complete bodies have never been found. In an April 2011 prison interview with Newsday, Rifkin denied having anything to do with recently discovered remains. Suspects and persons of interest. John Bittrolf. On the 12th of September, 2017, Suffolk County Prosecutor Robert Biancavilla said that John Bitrolf, a Suffolk County resident convicted of murdering 2 prostitutes and suspected in the murder of a third, was a suspect in at least one of the L.I.S.K murders. Biancavilla stated that Bittrolf was likely responsible for the deaths of other women, and that there were similarities between the Gilgo Beach crime scenes and Bittrolf's known murders, for which he was convicted in May 2017, and sentenced in September. Bittrolf was arrested in 2014 after his DNA was found on 2 murdered women, Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee, whose bodies were found in 1993 and 1994, respectively. The match had been made through DNA submitted by his brother, who was convicted in 2013 in an unrelated case. Bittrolf was convicted in May 2017 of these murders, and in September sentenced to consecutive terms of 25 years for each murder. The Suffolk County Police did not comment on the prosecutor's statement, due to the active homicide investigation of the L.I.S.K murders. Bitrolf's attorney rejected the prosecutor's assertion. Bitrolf lived in Manorville, 3 miles from where the torsos of L.I.S.K victims Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack were recovered. Bitrolf was a hunter who was said to enjoy killing animals. He was a carpenter by trade with access to hacksaws and electric saws. Because many of the bodies were found precisely dismembered, his access to and proficiency with these tools is of note. The grown daughter of Rita Tangredi, who was murdered by Bitrolf, was also the best friend of Melissa Barthelemy, who was one of the Jilgo Beach victims. 88. Barthelemy's mother said that her daughter Melissa had a lot of calls to Manorville from her phone before her death. Joseph Brewer. Joseph Brewer, an Oak Beach resident, was one of the last people known to have seen Shannon Gilbert alive. He hired her as an escort from Craigslist on the night of her disappearance. Brewer said that shortly after Gilbert arrived at his residence, she began acting erratically and fled his home. Gilbert was reportedly seen running through Oak Beach, pounding on the doors of homes in Brewer's neighborhood. Around this time, Gilbert called 911, saying that they were trying to kill her. Police, however, did not find any evidence of wrongdoing, and Brewer was quickly cleared as a suspect. James Burke. Former Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke was reported to have blocked an FBI probe of the L.I.S.K case during his time as police chief. In November 2016, Burke was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and conspiracy. Burke violently assaulted a man in custody who had stolen a duffel bag from his police vehicle. The duffel bag contained sex toys, a pornographic DVD and Viagra. 91. Burke pleaded guilty in February 2016 to charges of a civil rights violation and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Thomas Spoter, the then district attorney in Suffolk County, was convicted in December 2019 of conspiracy to cover up Burke's violent assault. Christopher McPartland, who had been Suffolk County's top anti-corruption prosecutor, was also convicted in the conspiracy. In December 2016, an attorney for Shannon Gilbert's family reported that an escort had stated that she suspected that Burke might be connected to the L.I.S.K cases. The escort, who identified herself as Leon, stated that at one party she had attended in April 2011 in Oak Beach she had seen Burke drag a woman of Asian appearance by the hair to the ground. Leanne said that when she saw Burke at a later party in August 2011, she decided to engage in sexual activity with him. She described an experience in which Burke violently yanked her head during oral sex to the point where she began to tear up. Burke was unable to reach orgasm and proceeded to throw $300 at her afterwards. At the time she was not a professional prostitute and she states that this was the first time she was paid for sex. Peter Hackett. 2 days after Gilbert's disappearance, Peter Hackett, a neighbor of Joseph Brewer who was a former physician and who had worked for Suffolk County as a police surgeon, phoned Shannon Gilbert's mother, Mary Gilbert. Mary Gilbert later recounted that Hackett said that he was taking care of Shannon, that he ran a home for wayward girls, and that he had given her medication because she was distressed. 3 days later, Hackett called Mary Gilbert again, denying that he had had any contact with her daughter and that he had previously phoned her. Investigators later confirmed through phone records that Hackett had indeed called Mary Gilbert twice following her daughter's disappearance. The marshy area where Gilbert's remains were found was near Hackett's backyard, and her personal items and clothing were found directly behind his property in the marsh. Gilbert's family filed a wrongful death suit against Hackett in November 2012, claiming that he took Gilbert into his home that morning and administered drugs to her, facilitating her death. The lawsuit was dismissed because it could not be proven that Hackett had administered drugs or treatment to Gilbert. Later police revealed that Hackett had a history of inserting himself into, or exaggerating his role in, certain major events. Police later ruled out Hackett as a suspect in the deaths of Gilbert and the L.I.S.K victims. Hackett left Oak Beach and moved to Florida with his family not long after Gilbert's disappearance. James Bisset. 2 days after Shannon Gilbert's remains were found, businessman James Bisset died by suicide in his car at Mattatuck Park. One of Bisset's businesses was a plant nursery which was the main supplier of burlap in the region. Many of the victims' remains were found wrapped in burlap.